It was a drizzly Friday evening when Ethan Brooks stepped into a dim bar in Seattle, shaking rain off his jacket, wanting nothing more than a quiet drink after a long week. The woman beside him, Olivia Carter, though he didn't know her name yet, glanced over with a smirk that told him she'd already sized him up and found him lacking. "Single dad?" she said, reading the faint ghost of a child's crayon mark on his left cuff. "No woman signs up to be second place." Ethan didn't argue. He set down his glass. He turned to look at her really look, and when he spoke, his voice was unhurried, almost quiet. "Then let's make a bet." Olivia froze, because something in his tone wasn't defensive, it wasn't wounded. It was something else entirely steady, and faintly dangerous, and before she understood what was happening, she realized she had already leaned forward to listen. The bar was called Harrow's, tucked between a dry cleaner and a pharmacy on the eastern fringe of Capitol Hill. It had low amber lights, a bartender named Dennis who never asked questions, and exactly the kind of unpretentious quiet that Ethan Brooks required on Friday nights. He came every week, rain or shine, and it was nearly always rain. Seattle in October had committed itself to a gray, close-hanging drizzle that purled on jacket sleeves and filmed the windows with a fog that no one bothered to wipe. Ethan liked that about it. The weather did not demand anything of you. He'd ordered a bourbon and taken the second stool from the end, his usual, and was turning his phone face down on the bar when she sat beside him. He registered her in the way you register a change in air pressure, not consciously, just as a fact. She was in a dark blazer, hair pulled back in a way that suggested the workday had started before dawn, and she was already holding a glass of something pale and cold. She glanced at him the way people assess distances across a room quickly, efficiently, and without warmth. "Long week?" she said. It wasn't quite friendly. "More like a test." "The usual kind," Ethan said. "What do you do?" "Construction management. Mid-rise residential, mostly." She nodded as if that confirmed something. "I'm a corporate attorney, mergers and acquisitions." She said it the way people state their height neutrally, but aware that it carries information. Ethan nodded and picked up his glass. He wasn't uninterested, exactly. He was just unhurried. It was when Dennis leaned over to refill her water and said, casually, "Your kid's drawing still up on the board." Ethan, gesturing to the small chalkboard near the register where Dennis let regulars pin things, that Olivia's expression shifted. On the board was a small piece of paper, held with a red thumbtack, a drawing in crayon, two figures, one tall and one very small, holding hands in front of what might have been a house or a box under a yellow sun that had too many rays. In a child's printing, "Me and Dad." "You have a child," she said. It came out flatter than she'd intended. "A son, Noah, he's 5. And the mother? She left when he was 8 months old. It's just the two of us." Olivia was quiet for a moment. Then, with the ease of someone who had built a career on saying difficult things in pleasant tones, "A single dad. That's admirable. Though I imagine it complicates things." She paused. "Romantically, I mean. No woman really signs up to be second place." She'd expected defensiveness. Most men got defensive. Or they got sheepish. Or they launched into an elaborate explanation of how they were very good fathers, as though that would settle the question she hadn't technically asked. Ethan set his glass down. He turned on his stool so he was facing her more directly, and he looked at her with the same focused, unhurried attention that he gave load-bearing plans and stress calculations, the look of a man who wanted to understand the actual structure of a thing before deciding what to do about it. "Where did you learn that?" he said. "Learn what?" "To say something like that and call it a compliment." Olivia blinked. That was not the response. "I wasn't being unkind. I was being honest." "You were being efficient," he said. "Which isn't the same thing." He paused. "Let's make a bet." The air between them changed. Olivia felt it some subtle recalibration, like when a room's temperature drops a single degree and the skin becomes aware of it. "What kind of bet?" she said. But Ethan had already turned back to his drink. "Come back next Friday," he said. "And I'll tell you." He left before she finished her glass. She sat for a long time after, looking at the chalkboard drawing, at the small house and the yellow sun, and felt to her considerable irritation that she had somehow lost a conversation she hadn't known she was in. Dennis came to collect the empty glasses. He looked at the drawing, then at her, with the incurious warmth of someone who has spent 20 years watching people figure things out at bars. He in every Friday, Dennis said. Good tipper. Talks to nobody usually. He talked to me, Olivia said. Yep, Dennis said, and went away. She put on her coat. She stood for a moment at the door with one hand on the wet brass handle, listening to the rain against the awning overhead. She had a very sharp mind. She used it constantly, professionally, in service of structures and agreements that held. She did not usually turn it on herself, because she had decided early in life that the most efficient use of a sharp instrument was to point it outward. But standing there with the handle cold in her palm, she had the uncomfortable awareness that she had said something mean, not cruel. Not deliberately so, but small and mean in the way of assumptions made at speed, and that someone had noticed without making a performance of it. That was, she recognized, the thing that was sitting poorly. Not the challenge, the noticing. She went out into the rain. Olivia Carter lived in a condominium on the 14th floor of a building with underground parking, and a concierge who greeted her by name every morning. The apartment was clean and quiet, and organized in the way of a person who controlled her environment because other things were harder to control. She had good wine, good light, a kitchen she rarely used, and no photographs on the walls, just a few prints she had selected from a gallery on the basis that they were beautiful and said nothing about her. She called her friend Emma Hargrove from the cab going home. You're calling me at 9:15 on a Friday, Emma said. So either something good happened or something weird. Something irritating, Olivia said. I met a man at a bar. And nothing. He said something that bothered me, and then he left. What did he say? Olivia paused. He said I was being efficient instead of honest. Emma was quiet for a moment. Was he right? That's not the point. It sounds like it's exactly the point, Emma said. What was the context? Olivia gave her the short version. The bar, the drawing on the board, the comment she had made about second place, the way he'd looked at her. So you said something dismissive to a single father, and he called you on it without getting angry, Emma summarized. And now you're annoyed. I'm not annoyed. You called me at 9:15 on a Friday. Olivia looked out the cab window at the city going past, amber-lit and wet. He asked me to come back next week. Said he'd tell me the rest of the bet then. And you want to go, Emma said. It wasn't a question. I'm curious, Olivia said carefully. That's different. Sure it is, Emma said, with the cheerful certainty of a woman who had known Olivia for 11 years and understood exactly what she meant by that kind of careful distinction. Let me know how the bet goes. Olivia put her phone away. The cab pulled up to her building, and the concierge held the door and said good evening. She rode the elevator up 14 floors to an apartment that was exactly as she'd left it, not a glass out of place, not a chair moved, and she stood in the kitchen for a while without turning on the lights, listening to the rain against the high windows. The apartment was not lonely. She didn't think of it that way. It was controlled. It was hers. She had worked very hard for it, and she liked it. But she stood there for a while. She had grown up in a house where stillness meant something was being suppressed, where quiet was the gap between an argument and its aftermath, where a room without noise was a room in waiting. She'd taught herself, by 20, to make her own stillness a different kind, intentional, selected, the silence of a person who has chosen to be alone rather than endured it. She was good at that distinction. She had applied it every day for 15 years. She stood in the dark kitchen and tried to remember why it had felt, up until 2 hours ago, completely sufficient. She turned on one light, made tea she didn't particularly want, sat at the counter with her hands around the mug and the city spreading below the window in its usual indifferent splendor, and thought about a man who had looked at her as though she were a load-bearing problem he was genuinely interested in understanding. She finished the tea. She went to bed. She did not think about Harrow's bar or its regulars, or the crayon drawing of a house with too many sun rays. She was very disciplined. It was one of her better qualities. By Thursday, she had thought about it 4 more times. She went back the following Friday. She dressed as she would for any other evening. Blazer. Dark trousers. Heels she hadn't bothered to change out of after a late client dinner. And she told herself she was going because Harrow's had decent wine, and she'd been meaning to try it properly. Ethan was already there. Second stool from the end. Bourbon. He looked up when she came in, and the small lift of his expression was not triumphant. It was just glad. She sat beside him. Dennis brought her what she'd had the week before, without being asked. "All right," she said. "Tell me about this bet." Ethan turned his glass slowly on the bar. "You said no woman signs up to be second place." "I did. What you meant," he said, "was that a child is a complication, a burden, something a man should apologize for. That's not what isn't it?" He wasn't accusatory. He said it the way he might say, "Are you sure about that measurement?" With genuine interest in the answer. "You categorized it before you knew anything about us, about how we live, about what kind of father I am or what kind of man." Olivia met his gaze. She was very good at not blinking. "You're saying I was wrong. I'm saying you were fast." He paused. "The bet is this. Spend time with us, with Noah and me, the way we actually are, and then tell me you still believe what you said. If you do, I'll buy your drinks for a month and never bother you again." He picked up his glass. "If you don't, you have to admit it out loud." "That's not a real bet," Olivia said. "There's no real stakes for you." "There are," he said. "If you come and still feel the same way, I'll know exactly where I stand." The bar was quiet around them. Someone at the other end was reading a paperback. Rain tapped at the window. "You're not trying to change my mind," she said slowly. "You're trying to show me something." "Yeah," Ethan said. "There's a difference." They talked for 2 hours that night, really talked. The way people do when they have stopped performing and started thinking out loud. He told her about the job. The satisfaction of knowing a building would stand for 50 years. The problem-solving of it. The particular pleasure of a load calculation that came out exactly right. She told him about her work in terms she didn't usually use, with people outside the firm, the intellectual architecture of a complex acquisition, the way it felt to find a structure that protected everyone who needed protecting. "You love it," he said. "I do," she said. "Does that surprise you?" "No," he said. "You have the face of someone who knows exactly what they're good at." She wasn't sure if that was a compliment. She thought about it on the walk to her car, rain slanting into her from the east, and decided that it was. They began meeting casually, an imprecise word for something that was, in fact, carefully assembled on both sides. Each of them pretending otherwise. Coffee on Tuesday mornings before her first brief and his site walkthrough. A walk along the waterfront on a Saturday when the rain eased off and the sound came up silver and cold and the gulls wheeled overhead without landing. A booth at a noodle place near Pike Place Market on a Thursday evening. Rain again, windows steamed, splitting an order of pork dumplings. Ethan talked about Noah the way you talk about a person you love without needing to explain it easily, concretely, with small, precise details. Noah had a phase, currently, of asking extremely specific questions about construction equipment. Did bulldozers sleep? Did cranes feel tired? Could a forklift feel proud of itself? Ethan answered all of these seriously. "That must be exhausting," Olivia said. "It's actually the best part of the day," Ethan said, without any performance of sentiment. He's thinking. He wants to understand how things work. Olivia thought about that. "Did you always want children?" "I wanted a family," he said. The specifics surprised me. He was quiet for a moment. "When Rachel left, when it became clear that she was not coming back, I had about 48 hours of real terror. Then I just started doing it, because someone had to." You make it sound straightforward. It wasn't. But useful things rarely are. She told him, in return, about her own upbringing, the kind of family where love was demonstrated through achievement, where the highest compliment was, "You handled that well." She'd gotten very good at handling things. It was its own kind of skill. "And that works for you," he said. It wasn't sarcasm. He genuinely wanted to know. "It works for my career," she said. And my career is most of my life, so... She paused. Yes, it works. Ethan looked at her for a moment, the way he sometimes did with that focused attention that did not ask anything of you but did not let you go, either. What's the part that doesn't work? Olivia looked down at her coffee. I didn't say there was a part that didn't work. You said, most of my life. Not all of it. She had not meant to leave that opening. She closed it carefully. The rest is still in development, she said lightly. He smiled at that, a real smile, not the polite kind. Fair enough. The thing about these mornings and evenings and walks along the water was that Olivia had stopped analyzing them after the second week. She'd started out, as she started out everything, with a kind of forensic interest cataloging, measuring, keeping her conclusions tentative. But somewhere around the third Tuesday, over a second coffee she hadn't ordered but Dennis had brought anyway, she'd noticed that she'd stopped cataloging. She was just there. In the conversation, not measuring the distance between herself and it. She didn't know what to do with that. She left it alone, the way you leave a loose thread when you're not sure what happens if you pull it. What she did notice was this. She laughed more. Not the polished, professionally calibrated laugh she deployed in meetings to indicate warmth without losing authority, her actual laugh. The one that caught her slightly off guard. Ethan said things that were dry and precise, and completely without effort to be funny, and she laughed at them, and he would look at her with that small expression of satisfaction, and they would continue talking. She noticed she ate more when they were together. She noticed she checked her phone less. She noticed that the 45 minutes she spent on the waterfront with him on a Saturday, watching the container ships move across the Sound in the flat gray light, talking about nothing in particular felt, by some measurement she could not formally articulate, more restorative than a weekend alone in her perfect apartment. These were data points. She collected them carefully. She had not yet decided what they added up to. There's someone I'd like you to meet, Ethan said. It was the fourth Saturday, the rain down to a mist, the park near his apartment gone golden and soft with the last of the autumn light. Olivia understood immediately who he meant. Ethan, it's just a walk, he said. No performance. He's a person. He should get to meet you. And you should get to meet him. She'd agreed before she'd finished deciding to agree. Noah was waiting by the park gate with a red rain jacket and a very serious expression, and a stick he'd been using as a walking staff. He was 5 years old and small for it, with Ethan's gray eyes and a total absence of shyness that seemed less like confidence than simple curiosity, the way a very young scientist approaches a new specimen. He looked at Olivia for a full 4 seconds. Are you Dad's friend? I think so, Olivia said. I'm Olivia. Noah. He offered his hand with great formality. She shook it. He seemed satisfied. Do you know what a shear wall is? She blinked. I do, actually. It's a wall that resists lateral forces in a structure, wind loads, and earthquakes. Noah turned to his father with an expression of distinct approval. She knows shear walls. I heard, Ethan said. They walked through the park for 40 minutes. Noah led, because Noah was carrying the stick, and apparently that settled the question of leadership. He narrated, as they went, a leaf that was the exact color of ketchup, a puddle that was probably a river, if you're small enough, a squirrel that he addressed directly and without embarrassment, asking if it had found enough acorns. At some point she couldn't have said exactly when Noah took her hand. He'd been walking between them, and had simply reached up and taken it. The way children do when they've decided someone is safe, which is to say without calculation, entirely on instinct. Olivia felt something shift in her chest, not dramatically. More the way a lock yields when the right key is applied, a smooth, quiet giving way. She glanced at Ethan. He was watching Noah name a crow. He hadn't staged this. She knew that, with the same certainty, she knew structural logic. It was just true. The crow's name is Gerald, Noah announced. He comes here every Saturday. I'm the only one who knows his name. That's a significant responsibility, Olivia said. Noah nodded gravely. I know. On the walk back, Ethan fell into step beside her while Noah raced ahead toward the gate. Well, Ethan said. He's extraordinary, Olivia said. He's himself, Ethan said. Which is the same thing, at his age. She thought about that for the rest of the afternoon. In her clean apartment with her good wine and her art prints that said nothing about her, the invitation to dinner was understated. The way Ethan's invitations always were. Noah wants spaghetti. There's always too much. If you want to come by around 6. A shrug. Up to you. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a low brick building, with original hardwood floors and windows that needed replacing but had good light anyway. It was tidy in the way of a household that has learned to function under honest conditions. A bookshelf with both adult novels and picture books mixed together without hierarchy, a drawing taped to the refrigerator, Gerald the Crow, rendered in blue crayon, a small pair of rain boots by the door lined up neatly next to a much larger pair. Noah was at the table with a coloring book when she arrived, and he looked up and said, "Good. Dad burned the bread a little but it's still okay," and went back to coloring. Ethan, at the stove, turned around. "Slightly toasted," he said. "Burned," Noah said, without looking up. Olivia laughed, a real one, catching her off guard. Dinner was spaghetti with a simple tomato sauce, and the slightly toasted bread, and a salad that Noah had helped assemble, which meant the croutons were piled mostly on one side. Noah talked continuously through the meal about Gerald, about shear walls, about a boy in his kindergarten class named Desmond who had refused to believe that cranes could lift a whole car. "I told him they could lift a whole building," Noah said. "He didn't believe that either. So I told him he should ask my dad." "Did he?" Ethan asked. "No. He doesn't believe Dad's either." Olivia found herself eating without noticing she was eating, which had not happened to her in years. She was usually very aware of meals, of their composition and pace. But Noah's ongoing monologue was so fully occupying, that corner of the brain normally engaged with such analysis, that she simply ate, and laughed, and passed the bread, and didn't think about anything except what was right in front of her. After dinner, Noah wanted to show her his book about excavators. She sat on the couch beside him, and he turned the pages with the proprietorial pride of an expert guiding a promising student. She asked questions. He answered them with the patience of someone who has been waiting a long time for a properly interested audience. When he fell asleep suddenly, in the way small children do, going from fully operational to unconscious between one breath and the next, Ethan carried him to his room and came back to find Olivia standing at the kitchen window with a glass of water, looking out at the street below. "Thank you," she said, without turning around. "For this. He likes you," Ethan said. "That's not something he does automatically." "I know." She paused. "I can tell." There was a silence that was not uncomfortable. Outside, the street was wet and orange-lit and very quiet. "I should go," she said. "Probably," he said. She went. And on the cab ride home, she noticed she was smiling, and did not try to understand why. She thought about it that night anyway. She sat on the edge of her bed in the quiet of the 14th floor, shoes off, still in her work clothes, and she thought about what it had felt like to sit on that couch while Noah turned the pages of his excavator book with the proprietary care of a professor guiding a student through primary texts. The feeling had not had a name while she was in it. It was acquiring one now, slowly, the way things do when you sit still and let them settle. It was the feeling of being genuinely included, not professionally included, not welcomed into a room because someone needed her expertise or her network, or the signal she sent by her presence. Just included, because a small boy had decided she was worth talking to about excavators. And so she was. She had not had that feeling in a very long time. She was uncertain she had ever had it in quite this form. She turned off the light. She lay in the dark for a while. In the morning she would be at her desk at 7:15, and there was a motion to prepare and 3 calls before noon, and she was very good at her job, and her job was most of her life. She lay in the dark and thought about the rain boots by the door. Lined up the large pair and the very small pair with the particular neatness of a household that has agreed, without saying so, that some things matter. The following week was relentless. A $300 million acquisition that had been quietly derailing for 6 weeks suddenly accelerated toward a midnight deadline, and Olivia slept 4 hours on Tuesday and 6 on Wednesday, and a clean 8 on Thursday, only because the deal had closed at 11:50 and she had permitted herself to go home. She was good in this mode. She'd always been good in it. The sharper the pressure, the clearer her thinking, a trait that had impressed every senior partner she'd ever worked under, and that she thought of as simply how she was built. But on Friday, sitting in the cold fluorescent quiet of her office at 7:30 p.m., she found herself thinking about spaghetti. She called Emma. "I met his son," she said. Emma took this in. "And?" "He named a crow Gerald." She paused. "I know that doesn't—" "No, I get it," Emma said immediately. "He named a crow Gerald, and now you're done." "I'm not done." Olivia stopped. "I don't know what I am. Tell me what's actually scaring you." Olivia turned her chair to face the window. 14 stories of city light, rain on the glass. It's already there. The whole thing. The dinner and the apartment and the child and the she stopped again. "I don't have a word for it." "Warmth," Emma said. "I was going to say structure." "It's both," Emma said. "And that's what's scaring you. You're afraid of losing yourself in it." "I'm afraid of not being enough for it," Olivia said. It came out before she decided to say it. She looked at it for a moment, the sentence, the fact of it. "I know how to be good at things I control. I don't know how to be good at caring about something you might lose," Emma said quietly. Olivia didn't answer. The city was lit up out there, 14 floors down, going on without her, as it always did. "You've been protecting yourself for a very long time," Emma said. "That's not a character flaw. It's a habit. Habits can change." "I know," Olivia said. "I know that. The question," Emma said, "is whether you think he's worth the work." Olivia was quiet for a long time. Then, both of them. "I know," Emma said. "That's what makes it real." She stayed at her desk for another hour, after she put the phone down, not working. Just sitting in the particular quiet of a building, after hours the HVAC running, somewhere far below the faint percussion of a cleaning crew, the city going on outside the glass, with its usual indifference to individual reckoning. She had built her career on the premise that clarity was always better than ambiguity. That the worst thing you could do, in a complex situation, was refuse to name what was happening. She charged clients significant hourly rates for her ability to name things precisely and act on the naming. So she named this. Sitting in the fluorescent quiet, she looked at it honestly. She was in love with a man and his son. And she was afraid, and the fear was specifically located in the fact that she could lose them, that she could get this wrong, get herself wrong, and find that she had not been built for the thing she most wanted to be part of. That was the shape of it. It was clearer now that she'd looked at it directly. Clarity did not, it turned out, make it easier. It just made it real. She pulled back. She did it with the precision she applied to everything cleanly, with good reasons, creating just enough space to breathe. She texted instead of calling. She was busy, which was always partially true. She rescheduled the coffee twice. She told herself it was necessary, that she needed to think clearly, and thinking clearly required distance. This was true in her professional life. She often stepped away from a complex negotiation for a day. Let the terms settle. Returned with a cleaner eye. She applied the same logic here, and told herself it was the same thing. It was not the same thing. Ethan did not push. She'd half expected him to a call, a message, something that would give her something to resist. But he sent only one text, 3 days into the withdrawal, and it said, "I hope you're okay. No pressure from my end." She put the phone down and went back to work and told herself this was the correct thing. It was not the correct thing. She knew this in the way she knew most things she was trying not to know, obliquely, from the evidence. The evidence was, she slept less. She stood in the kitchen in the evenings, without turning on the lights more than once. She found herself, in a meeting about the terms of a commercial lease, thinking about Gerald the Crow, and whether he came to the park when Noah wasn't there to name him. 10 days after she'd started pulling back, she got a text from a number she didn't recognize. It was a photograph. Gerald the Crow, mid-strut, very serious. Photographed from a low angle. as though the photographer had been crouching. Below it, in careful printing, "Hi, this is No. Dad showed me how to text. Gerald is okay, in case you were wondering." Olivia sat very still for a full minute. Then she called Ethan. "He wasn't supposed to use my phone unsupervised," Ethan said. He sounded not quite apologetic. "I'm sorry if that was." "Is he there?" Olivia said. A pause. Then, small and careful, "Yeah, you want to? Put him on." There was a rustling. Then, "Hi, Olivia." "Hi, Noah." She cleared her throat. "Thank you for the photo. He was there today. I wanted you to know because I thought maybe you were worried." She pressed a hand to her sternum. "I was," she said. "I really was. It was very thoughtful of you." A long pause. Then, "Are you coming back?" She closed her eyes. "Yes," she said. "I'm coming back." She heard him, faint, talking to someone else. "She's coming back." And faintly, Ethan's voice. "Just good." She walked to his building. It was 8 blocks, and it was raining. Not the usual mist, but actual rain. Persistent and cold. And she hadn't brought an umbrella because she hadn't planned to walk anywhere. And she went anyway. She walked, and she thought about what Emma had said. About habits and what they protect you from. About the difference between being careful and being closed. And how long she had stood on the wrong side of that line telling herself the view was fine. She passed a lit pharmacy. A late restaurant with condensation on the windows. A bus stop with 2 people under it who did not look at her as she went past in the rain. The city was doing what cities do at 9 o'clock on a Thursday, persisting, indifferently, full of people in the middle of their own reckonings, none of whom knew or cared about hers. She thought about Ethan, not the version of him she'd constructed in the first 10 minutes of knowing him, the simplified version, the single dad, the complication, the man she'd already filed. The actual one, the way he sat in a conversation, the way he answered Noah's questions about cranes, with the same careful honesty he applied to everything else. The way he'd said, at the bar on that first Friday, "Let's make a bet," not as a game, she understood now, but as an invitation. Come and see. She thought about the apartment, hers. With its good light, and its careful prints, and its kitchen she rarely used. It was a beautiful apartment. It was hers, and she could fill it with more beautiful things, and keep it exactly as she kept it, and it would remain exactly as it was. That was not actually what she wanted. She'd known this for a while, probably. She stood outside his building with rain in her hair, and her good coat getting wet, and she thought, this is what it looks like to stop being efficient. To just be present in a thing without having calculated the odds first. She buzzed. The intercom crackled. Ethan's voice. "Yeah, it's me," she said. "I'm wet." A pause. Then, the door buzzed open. He was waiting in the doorway of the apartment when she came up the stairs. He looked at her, the wet coat, the damp hair, the elevator she apparently hadn't waited for, and he didn't say anything right away. She stopped in the hallway. "I don't know how to do this," she said. "I want to be very clear about that. I know how to do a great many things, and this is not one of them." "I know," he said. "I'm going to get things wrong. I'm probably going to pull back again when I get scared, because apparently that's my move." "I know that too." She looked at him. "You're not going to tell me it'll be easy." "No," he said. "But nothing worth having is. That's a terrible thing to say." "It's true," he said. She exhaled. "I want to try," she said. "I'm asking you, both of you, if that's enough for now. If trying is something I can offer you." Ethan looked at her for a moment with that particular steadiness that she had come to understand was not indifference, but its exact opposite, the kind of calm you earn by having already survived the hard things. "Olivia," he said, "you drove here in the rain. I think we're past the part where I need you to qualify it." She laughed, a surprised sound, a little undignified. He smiled. The real one. And he stepped back from the doorway to let her in. From inside the apartment, very clearly, a small voice. "Dad. Is Olivia here?" "Yeah, Bud," Ethan called back. A pause. Then, with profound satisfaction, "I told you she'd come back." It was not a tidy transition. Real things rarely are. There were evenings when her work ran past 9 and she missed dinner. And Noah was already asleep when she arrived. And she would sit at the kitchen table while Ethan reheated whatever he'd made, and they would talk quietly in the way of people who have agreed to share the weight of their days. There were mornings when Noah woke early and came down the hall to find her on the couch with a brief and a coffee, and regarded her with the calm of a child who has accepted a new element in his environment and chosen to find it acceptable. "You work a lot," he said one such morning. "I do," she said. "Does that bother you?" He considered it with the seriousness he applied to most things. "No," he said finally. "Dad works a lot too. He says it's how you make the money for the things you need." "That's right. I need a new excavator book," he said. "Mine's getting worn." "I'll look into that," she said. "Okay." He went to get his cereal. She told Ethan, later, about this conversation, and he laughed and said he'd take the excavator book off her hands, and she said she had already ordered it a new edition with updated equipment, and there was a small silence in which something was understood between them that neither of them needed to say. She did not move in gradually. She moved in the way you move toward a thing you have decided on, with intention, and not all at once, but steadily. Her blazers appeared in the closet. Her coffee appeared in the cabinet. On a Sunday in November, she helped Ethan paint the kitchen, a color Noah had chosen, a particular green he called Gerald green. That was, in fact, very nearly the color of the crow in his drawings, and they stood afterward with paint on their hands looking at the wall, and Noah said it was perfect, and Ethan said it was very green, and Olivia said she thought it was perfect too. She learned the rhythms. Kindergarten drop-off at 8:15, which she managed on Tuesdays and Thursdays when her schedule allowed, walking Noah the 3 blocks to the low brick building while he narrated the state of the sky. Grocery runs on Saturday mornings when the market wasn't yet crowded, Noah riding in the cart with the eggs in his lap, very careful. Movie nights on Fridays, Noah choosing, which meant a rotation of 3 films he had declared the greatest films ever made, one of which was about a dog, and one of which was about a train, and one of which Olivia had not previously seen, but now knew by heart. She was not always good at it. There were evenings she came in too tight wound from a bad day, and brought the sharpness of it into the apartment before she'd thought to put it down. And Ethan would look at her and say nothing immediately, just give her the space to let it go, and usually after a few minutes and a glass of water she could. There were Saturday mornings when Noah was difficult, genuinely, deeply, 5 years old, inconsolable about something that seemed arbitrary, and Olivia didn't always know the right response, and watched Ethan handle it with the particular competence of a person who has learned through sheer accumulated repetition and felt the gap between his experience and hers with a pang she was learning to call useful instead of shameful. Once, on a morning when Noah had woken before 6 and could not articulate what was wrong, and simply cried with the total commitment of a child who has not yet learned to muffle distress, Olivia had done the only thing she could think of. She had sat on the floor beside him and said, very quietly, "I don't always know what's wrong either, but I stay anyway." Noah had looked at her with his tear-streaked face and his father's gray eyes, and after a moment had leaned against her shoulder, and they had sat like that until the crying stopped, and the morning came properly through the window, and Ethan appeared in the doorway with 2 glasses of orange juice and a look that said he had seen all of that and was grateful in a way that would take years to fully say. "You don't have to already know it," Ethan said one evening, when she'd said something like this out loud. "Nobody does. You just have to show up. You make it sound simple. I've had 5 years of practice," he said. "You've had 2 months. She thought about that. "Ask me again in 5 years, she said. He looked at her. "Yeah? Yes," she said. "Ask me then." The winter came properly in December, real cold. The sky pressing down gray and close, the sound going flat and quiet under the overcast, and Noah decided that winter required a different approach to Gerald, who might, he worried, be cold. "Crows have feathers," Ethan said. "So do people. Almost," Noah said. "And we still wear coats." Olivia, who was reading a brief at the kitchen table, said, "That's a very good point, actually." Noah gave her the nod of a scientist whose methodology has been validated. "So I'm going to bring Gerald some peanuts," he said. Because you can't eat peanuts in a coat, but you can eat them anyway. Brilliant, Olivia said. They went to the park on Sunday, all three of them, and Noah deployed the peanuts with great ceremony, and Gerald came, because Gerald always came when Noah was there, and ate the peanuts with the efficient focus of a bird who has excellent priorities. He says thank you, Noah reported. Tell him he's welcome, Olivia said. Ethan was standing beside her, hands in his jacket pockets, watching Noah and the crow, with the expression he wore sometimes not quite smiling but settled, the way a house settles onto good foundations. She leaned against him slightly. He didn't move. The park was empty and cold and very still, the trees bare against the gray sky, and Noah was in serious negotiation with a crow. And this was, she thought, this was what she had not had a word for. Not warmth, though it was that. Not structure, though it was that too. It was just this. The ordinary, specific weight of it. The peanuts, and the crow, and the cold, and the man beside her, and the small boy who had taken her hand in a park in October and not let go. She had spent a long time optimizing for a life without this kind of weight. She understood now that she had been optimizing for the wrong thing. The thing she had said to a stranger at a bar in October no woman signs up to be second place had been, she now recognized. A statement about herself, about the particular story she'd told herself about what love cost and what it asked of you, and whether she was equipped to pay it. She had dressed the story up as worldly wisdom and deployed it as a shield, and she had almost used it to keep herself from this, from a crow named Gerald, from a small pair of rain boots lined up by the door, from the specific, irreducible weight of a child's hand in hers. Noah turned around. Olivia, can you come again tomorrow? She felt Ethan, beside her, go very still. She looked at Noah, 5 years old, red rain jacket. The stick he'd carried since October in his right hand. Gerald the crow 3 feet behind him, regarding all of them with what looked like tolerance, and she said, I'm not going anywhere. Noah nodded. This, apparently, was the correct answer. He turned back to Gerald. Ethan, beside her, exhaled. She took his hand. He held it. Above them, Gerald lifted off without warning and banked north over the tree line, black and purposeful against the gray Seattle sky. And Noah watched him go, with an expression of such complete, unguarded love that Olivia felt it in her sternum like a key finding its lock. The rain came back, soft and close, the way it always did. They stood in it together, all three of them, and it was not cold. The small wedding happened in March, in the backyard of Emma Hargrove's house in Wallingford, under a canopy of string lights, and with more rain than anyone had planned for and exactly the right number of people. Noah was the ring bearer, a role he had accepted with the gravity it deserved, and he walked the length of the path between the folding chairs with the focus of a structural engineer checking a load calculation. He delivered the rings. He looked at both of them with the expression of someone who has been patient for a long time and is pleased that the thing has finally been organized properly. Okay, he said, now you're stuck. The people under the canopy laughed. The officiant laughed. Olivia laughed, and Ethan laughed. And someone near the back said that was the best thing they'd ever heard at a wedding. And it probably was. Afterward, in the kitchen, while the guests were outside under the canopy, and the rain had eased to the usual mist, Noah came and found Olivia and said, I have a question. Okay, she said. Can I call you Mom? He said it very directly, the way he said everything important. I know you're Olivia, but Mom is a different word. It means something different. Olivia looked at him. 8 years old now, almost as tall as her shoulder. Those gray eyes that were his father's. Yes, she said. You can call me that. He nodded. Okay. He started back toward the door, then paused. Gerald came to the park last week. How was he? Good, Noah said. He's always good. And he went back out into the mist. Ethan found her a minute later. He looked at her face and said nothing, just put an arm around her. She leaned into him, through the window, the backyard, Noah in his good jacket, navigating the gathering with the confidence of someone who has never doubted he belongs. Emma talking to Ethan's site supervisor. the string lights swaying slightly. Everyone they loved, in one place, under one canopy. Olivia Carter had spent a long time believing that love was a complication, a variable to be controlled, minimized, managed. She had said so, with a smirk, to a man in a dim bar in Seattle. On a rainy Friday in October. She had been wrong. She had been so completely, specifically, usefully wrong. The man had known it. He hadn't said so directly, that wasn't how he worked. He had simply said, "Come and see." And she had come, eventually, in the rain, without an umbrella, and seen, and what she had seen was this. Love is not second place. It is not a cost or a complication or a thing you sign up for in full knowledge of the terms. It is a crow named Gerald, and a child who knows what a shear wall is, and a man who answers every question seriously, including the ones you haven't asked yet. It was, she thought, exactly the kind of structure that holds. "Hey," Ethan said. "Hey, you okay?" She had been asked this question many times in her life, and she had answered it many ways fine. Yes, of course. Don't worry about it, all versions of the same deflection, offered quickly so the conversation could move on to something more manageable. "Yeah," she said. And then, because it was true, and this was the place for true things. "Really? I'm really okay." Outside, Noah laughed at something, and the sound of it came through the glass, clear and easy. And the rain came down on the city as it always had, and always would, and it was not cold at all. She had made a bet, once, in a bar, on a rainy Friday in October. She had thought she was the one doing the testing. She understood now that she had been the one being shown something slowly, patiently, without performance until she was ready to see it. She was ready.